In our 21 days of wellness chats, we're here with Dr. May today to talk about positive mindset during the holidays. When facing crisis and uncertainty, our minds go into the worst places. And this is so true of this pandemic, which is marked by so much chaos and negativity. On that note, May, I would like to ask you, how can we cultivate a positive mindset while we're still in these kind of situations?
Mhm. Well, thank you, Anshu, first for having me on here. I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak to some folks. Just in terms of this idea of a positive mindset, I wanna just kind of revise the language just a little bit because sometimes we get caught up in the idea of positive versus negative.
Mhm.
Then we start to go on this tangent of how do I determine what's positive versus what's negative? Sometimes what's positive then turns negative. So instead, I'm going to encourage folks to think more in terms of a growth mindset. And so what I mean by that is having the mental flexibility, having options. So rather than getting stuck in this idea of a fixed mindset, meaning A plus B equals C, maybe A plus B could equal C, D, E, or F. And so it's about cultivating many options and choices and being comfortable with that idea. So that's where I would start. Now, in terms of how do we get to that growth mindset, I think it all goes back to, especially in times like these, back to our core values in life. So, what is it that we stand for in life? What is it that sort of anchors us in our day to day? So, for some folks, myself included, it's health, mental health, and physical health, it's family, and then it's personal growth. So if you know what you stand for in life, then it begins to be a lot easier to start intentionally driving your behaviors in a way that lines up with those values, right? In some ways, your values are the destinations on a roadmap, and the goals that we set in our day to day, right, big and small, are driving our behaviors to line up with those values. And in that way, we're growing.
I think that is so important what you said there. And also I think a lot of people are going to listen to this and be like, okay, you know what, growth mindset, and this is so cool. A lot of people probably hearing about growth mindset and fixed mindset for the first time, but some individuals don't know how to start and maintain this process of probably getting into a growth mindset. Could you elaborate on it a little bit?
Absolutely. I think the number one thing that we often get caught up in is maybe poor goal setting. A lot of us, especially with the new year coming around, we tend to get caught up in these really big goals. You know, I'm going to improve my health and well being, I'm going to get fit. But what exactly does that mean? In fact, when you set your goals so large, so broad, it becomes overwhelming to know where to start. And rather than wanting to deal with the overwhelm, especially when we're already overwhelmed now, we sort of back off. And that's when we get into those habits of procrastinating, or avoiding. And so what I would say is that if change is the goal, then the best way to think about it is small changes. So in a sense, where it starts is knowing what your baseline is for anything. So for example, you know, eating, that's a pretty obvious, I think that's probably an easy example to use. A lot of us, especially coming around to the holidays, will be thinking about nutrition and food consumption. And so if we record what our baseline eating habits are like without making any changes or expectations, and then once we have a picture of what that baseline is, start making small changes, tweaks. So, for example, we can use, there's a principle called the QQF, quality, quantity, frequency. So, for example, for folks who like to eat a lot of the sweets during the holidays, you might just want to say to yourself, okay, I'm not willing to give up the sweets, and that's fine. And I don't have to feel bad about it. That's part of the growth mindset, not being fixed and rigid in one belief or another, but rather just attuning to what we value in life and making adjustments accordingly. And so, for example, if I want to lessen the impact of these sweets later down the road, I might say to myself, okay, so what am I willing to negotiate on? If not getting rid of the sweet, then can I negotiate on how much I eat, how frequently I eat it, and maybe the quality? So, do I go with the thinner or calorie wise versions of these foods? So, it's really about lasting long term change happens when you know what your baseline is, and then you make small changes to that baseline information in a way that it doesn't interrupt your day to day.
You're so right. As you're talking, I was just thinking about sometimes we ourselves think of big goals, and like you said, like I need to lose 20 pounds, and it's the goal is so big and so intimidating that even before taking a small step and working towards it, we stop. And then obviously we set ourselves up for failure rather than success. So I really appreciate you being able to share that small steps, and I think being consistent in doing those things is also very important.
Yes, exactly. And again, in honoring this idea of a growth mindset, it's being able to change the way we speak to ourselves. And so when we're attempting change in these small approaches, and sometimes things don't work out. In fact, it's usually a matter of when, not if. And
Mm.
so it's instead of beating ourselves up in this very rigid, fixed way, like, well, didn't I set out this plan, didn't get the outcome. Instead, let's change the language we use because we know we're creatures that respond to language. So let's change the way we talk to ourselves. And instead of saying this was a failure, this was a mistake, whatever words you want to use, let's instead look at it as, that didn't go the way I had planned initially. What did I learn? And in framing it that way, framing all of our challenges and obstacles and mishaps and mistakes as moments or opportunities of learning, that in a sense reinforces the habit of a growth mindset rather than a fixed one.
Wow, that you said that's so beautifully, May. Thank you so much for joining us today and being part of our wellness chats. Thank you to all our viewers for tuning in and watching this. And please stay tuned for more episodes and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.